He took my innocence and made me his Luna, a werewolf romance audiobook. I never should have taken the shortcut through Blackridge Forest. Everyone in the small town of Pinehaven knew the stories. People who wandered too deep into those ancient woods sometimes never returned. Local legend blamed everything from wild animals to vengeful spirits. But most rational people chalked it up to hikers getting lost or falling victim to the treacherous terrain that I used to be. One of those rational people. The rain had started as a gentle patter when I left the diner after my late shift, but quickly transformed into a vicious downpour that rendered my broken umbrella useless. My ancient Honda had refused to start, again, leaving me with two choices: wait out the storm or walk the 3 miles home. With rent due tomorrow and not enough tips to cover it, I couldn't afford to call ACAB.so. I made the decision that would change my life forever. I took the path through Blackridge Forest. It'll save you 20 minutes, I muttered to myself, mimicking my co-workers' well-meaning advice as I sloshed through puddles that soaked through my worn sneakers. The main road floods anyway, Lena. You'll be fine. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the forest entrance like the gateway to another world. The rational part of my brain, the part that had gotten me through 4 years of college and away from my nightmare of a hometown, said to turn back. Find another way. Wait out the storm. But I was tired of waiting. Tired of playing it safe. Tired of the crushing weight of student loans and the humiliation of serving customers who had once been my classmates, people whose lives had somehow worked out while mine had crumbled beneath me.so. I stepped into the shadows, the dense canopy offering minimal shelter from the deluge. The narrow dirt path quickly became a muddy stream as I trudged forward, using my phone's flashlight to navigate roots and rocks that seemed determined to trip me. 10 minutes in, the rain intensified, and the wind howled through the trees with an almost human quality, a keening, desperate sound that raised the hair on my arms. My light caught the glint of something metallic ahead, a chain-link fence stretching across the path with a clear warning sign. Private property trespassers will be prosecuted. Blackridge Timber Co. You've got to be kidding me, I groaned, shivering as cold rainwater trickled down my spine. This fence hadn't been here last summer when I'd hiked through with friends. It cut directly across the path, extending into the darkness on either side. Going around would mean venturing off-trail into the wilderness, a terrible idea during a storm. Going back meant another 40 minutes in the downpour. The bottom of the fence had been pulled up slightly at one point, creating a gap just large enough for a person to squeeze through. Someone else had clearly faced my same dilemma and found a solution. Before I could reconsider, I dropped to my knees, ignoring the mud soaking through my jeans, and pushed my backpack through the opening. As I wriggled beneath the chain link, a sharp edge caught my forearm, tearing both my jacket and the skin beneath. I bit back a cry, feeling warm blood mixing with cold rain as I finally pulled my legs through to the other side. Perfect, I muttered, examining the 3-inch gash in the beam of my flashlight. Not deep enough for stitches, but deep enough to hurt like hell. I dug through my backpack with my good arm, finding a clean napkin from the diner to press against the wound. That's when I heard it. A low growl that froze my blood faster than the rain ever could. My light beam jerked upward, catching a pair of reflective eyes watching me from between the trees. Too high off the ground to be a coyote or fox, too predatory to be a deer. Wolf? There hadn't been wolves in these parts for decades. Yet there it stood, massive and unmoving, water streaming off a coal-black coat that absorbed my flashlight beam like a void. Only those eyes reflected back, amber and unervingly intelligent, fixed on me with an intensity that felt more human than animal. Run, my instincts screamed. But my body refused to move, locked in some primal standoff with a predator that seemed equally frozen. The wolf, if that's truly what it was, took one deliberate step forward, then another. Close enough now that I could see its massive size, easily twice that of any wolf I'd seen in documentaries. Its shoulders stood as high as my waist, its head nearly at my chest. This wasn't just abnormal. It was impossible. Nice doggy, I whispered, my attempt at humor falling flat even to my own ears. I'm just passing through, not looking for trouble. The creature tilted its head slightly, as if considering my words. Another step closer. My paralysis broke. I scrambled backward, dropping my phone in the process. It landed face up in a puddle, the flashlight beam shooting skyward like a distress signal. In the diffused light, I could see the wolf's muzzle clearly now, pulled back to reveal teeth designed for tearing flesh. I ran. Branches whipped my face as I abandoned the path, plunging deeper into unknown territory. My breath came in ragged gasps that burned my lungs, feet slipping on the rain-soaked ground. Behind me, I heard nothing. No crashing pursuit, no growling. Somehow more terrifying than if the beast had immediately given chase. Was it toying with me, waiting for me to tire myself out? A root caught my ankle, sending me sprawling face first down a sudden incline. I tumbled, unable to stop my momentum, rocks and sticks scraping against my skin until I slammed into something solid enough to knock the air from my lungs. Pain exploded across my ribs. For several seconds, I could only lie there, struggling to breathe, rain pelting my face as I stared up at the storm-tossed trees spinning above me. When I finally managed to push myself up on my elbows, I realized I had crashed into a fallen log at the edge of a small clearing, and I was no longer alone. The wolf stood at the top of the incline I had just tumbled down, its massive silhouette backlit by another flash of lightning. Even through the curtain of rain, I could feel those amber eyes tracking me, calculating, measuring the distance between us. There was nowhere left to run. My body was battered, my energy spent. If this was how my story ended, torn apart in Blackridge Forest because I'd been too stubborn to wait out a storm, then at least it would put an end to the constant struggle my life had become. The thought came with a surprising calmness. I pushed myself to my feet, refusing to die cowering on the ground. Come on then. I called up to the creature, my voice steadier than I felt. Let's get this over with. The wolf seemed to consider my challenge, head tilting again in that unsettlingly human way. Then it began its descent down the slope, not in a rush of predatory excitement, but with deliberate, almost regal movements. As it reached the clearing, something strange happened. The rain between us seemed to warp, the very air shimmering like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. The wolf's form began to blur, its outlines stretching and reshaping in impossible ways that I blinked rapidly, certain I was hallucinating from the fall or from sheer terror. When my vision cleared, the wolf was gone. In its place stood a man, naked, powerful, with water sluicing down bronze skin stretched over hard muscle. His black hair was slicked back from a face carved from harsh angles and uncompromising planes, and his eyes, the same impossible amber that had fixed on me through the wolf's gaze. "You're trespassing," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the clearing despite the storm's rage. "These woods belong to my pack." Pack. The word echoed in my mind, unlocking childhood stories my grandmother had whispered during long winter nights. Tales I had dismissed as fantasy and folklore. "You're not real," I whispered, backing away until I felt the rough bark of a tree against my spine. "You can't be real." A humorless smile curved his lips, revealing teeth that still looked too sharp to be fully human. "And yet here I stand, very real and growing impatient with your presence on my territory. I was just taking a shortcut home," I managed, my words tumbling over each other. "The fence? I didn't know. The fence exists to keep humans out," he cut in, closing the distance between us with predatory grace. "For their protection as much as ours. Yet you ignored the warning." He stopped mere inches from me, close enough that I could feel the unnatural heat radiating from his body despite the cold rain. This close, I could see the savage scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw, a mark of violence that spoke of battles survived and enemies defeated. "Give me one reason," he said softly, one hand coming up to rest against the tree beside my head, effectively caging me in. "Why I shouldn't tear out your throat for this invasion." Fear and something else, something I refused to acknowledge, coiled in my stomach as a scent enveloped me, wild and masculine, pine and earth and something primal that made my pulse quicken. "Because," I said, surprising myself with sudden clarity, "you would have done it already if that was your intention." His eyes narrowed, that amber gaze seeming to pierce straight through me, stripping away pretenses until I felt more exposed than he was, despite being fully clothed. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Lena," I answered automatically. "Lena Mitchell." Something flickered across his face. Recognition? Impossible. I'd never seen this man before in my life. I would have remembered. "Lena," he repeated, my name rolling off his tongue like he was tasting it. For a heart-stopping moment, he leaned closer, his face hovering near the curve where my neck met my shoulder. He inhaled deeply, and I felt rather than heard the growl that rumbled through his chest. Then, abruptly, he stepped back, his expression hardening into a mask of cold authority. "Follow me," he commanded, turning away without checking if I would obey. "The storm is getting worse, and there are things in these woods far more dangerous than me." I stared at his retreating back, mind racing through limited options. Return to the storm and potentially face other creatures like him? Or follow this man, this impossible being who had transformed from wolf to human before my eyes? "Why should I trust you?" I called after him, my voice nearly lost in a crash of thunder. He glanced over his shoulder, those amber eyes gleaming with something that might have been amusement or hunger. "You shouldn't," he replied simply. "But if I wanted to hurt you, Lena Mitchell, you would already be bleeding out on the forest floor." With that comforting thought, he continued walking, his naked form soon swallowed by the shadows between the trees that I stood frozen for several heartbeats. The rain washing away the last traces of the world I had known, the world where monsters existed only in stories and nightmares. Then, with a silent prayer to whatever gods might be listening, I pushed away from the tree and followed the werewolf into the darkness. The forest seemed to close in behind us as I followed the naked stranger through the storm. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating a path that appeared and disappeared with each step. Under different circumstances, I might have been mortified by the sight of his bare back, the powerful muscles shifting beneath bronze skin, the way rainwater traced paths down his spine too. I forced my eyes upward, focusing instead on the rain-slicked canopy above. Regardless of what he was, man or wolf or something in between, ogling him felt both inappropriate and dangerous. "Keep up," he called over his shoulder, not breaking stride. "These woods aren't safe after dark," says the man who turns into a wolf. I muttered, stumbling over a hidden root. He stopped so abruptly, I nearly crashed into his back. When he turned, his amber eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. "You think I'm the most dangerous thing in Blackridge Forest?" A humorless laugh escaped him. "Your ignorance might get you killed yet, human." Before I could respond, he'd grabbed my wrist, his touch scorching against my rain-chilled skin. He pulled my arm up, examining the gash from the fence that had nearly stopped bleeding. "You're marked," he said, his voice suddenly grave. "The scent of your blood carries for miles in this rain." "Mark." I tried to pull away, but his grip was unyielding. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, he released my arm and continued walking, his pace faster now. "It means we need shelter. Now." We pushed through dense underbrush until the trees suddenly gave way to a small clearing. In the center stood a cabin, not the rustic vacation rental type that dotted the outskirts of Pine Haven, but something more primitive and solid, built from massive logs that had weathered countless seasons. No electricity lines ran to it, no vehicle access visible, just wilderness and the structure rising from it as naturally as the trees themselves. He strode to the heavy wooden door, pushing it open without a key or lock that I could see. Inside was pitch darkness until he struck a match, lighting an oil lamp that cast the interior in a warm amber glow, the same color as his eyes. "In," he commanded, standing aside to let me enter first. Stepping over the threshold felt momentous, as if I were crossing a boundary more significant than mere wood and stone. The cabin was a single large room with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Furs and hand-woven rugs covered the plank floor. A bed, large enough for two and piled with more furs, stood in one corner. A wooden table with 2 chairs occupied another. Simple shelves held books, jars of what looked like dried herbs, and various implements whose purposes I couldn't guess. And no electricity. No running water that I could see. No phone or television or any other connection to the modern world I'd left behind when I stepped into Blackridge Forest. While I took in my surroundings, he moved efficiently around the space, lighting more lamps and kneeling before the fireplace to build a fire. The flames caught quickly, sending shadows dancing across the walls and his still naked form. "Do you have, clothes?" I finally asked, my gaze fixed firmly on a point above his head. He glanced over his shoulder, and I could have sworn the corner of his mouth twitched. "Does my form make you uncomfortable, Lena Mitchell?" The way he said my name, like he was committing it to memory, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. It's just customary. Where I come from, I managed. And where is that exactly? He asked, rising to his full height and making no move to cover himself. A place where people wear pants when they have company, I replied, surprising myself with a spark of defiance. This time, I was certain I saw amusement flicker across his severe features before he moved to a wooden trunk at the foot of the bed. He withdrew a pair of worn leather pants, stepping into them with casual grace. Better? He asked, still shirtless, but at least partially covered. Getting there. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how thoroughly soaked and chilled I was. My thin diner uniform, a polyester nightmare even when dry, clung to my skin like a second, clammy layer. He seemed to notice my discomfort for the first time. You need dry clothes. I don't suppose you have a women's section in that trunk. He ignored my attempt at humor, retrieving a simple linen shirt and what looked like soft buckskin pants. These will be too large, but they're dry. He placed them on the bed, then pointed to a screen in the corner I hadn't noticed before. You can change there. The normalcy of the courtesy struck me as absurd, given the circumstances. A werewolf, because that's what he had to be, was worried about my modesty after transforming from wolf to naked man before my eyes that I took the clothes and retreated behind the screen, peeling off my sodden uniform with trembling fingers. The shirt smelled of pine and smoke and something wild that I now recognized as a scent. It hung almost to my knees, the sleeves dangling well past my fingertips. The pants required creative rolling at the waist and ankles but stayed up. When I emerged, he had added logs to the fire and placed a kettle over the flames. His back was to me as he worked at a small counter, the muscles across his shoulders bunching and relaxing with each movement. Who are you? I asked, the question that had been burning since I first saw those amber eyes in the forest. He turned, his gaze traveling over me in my borrowed clothes with an intensity that made my skin warm despite the chill in my bones. Damon, he replied simply. Damon Blackridge. Like the forest. The forest is named for my family. He gestured to one of the chairs at the table. Sit. I hesitated, then complied, watching as he brought 2 earthenware mugs to the table. Steam rose from a liquid that smelled of herbs and honey. Drink, he said, pushing one toward me. It will ward off the cold. I raised the mug cautiously to my lips, the warmth seeping into my hands. The taste was unexpectedly pleasant, earthy and sweet with hints of spice I couldn't identify. Thank you, I said after a few sips had indeed begun to warm me from the inside. For not killing me, I guess. And for the shelter. Damon sat across from me, his large frame making the sturdy chair look almost delicate. His eyes never left my face as he drank from his own mug. The storm will pass by morning, he said. Then I'll escort you back to the human town. Pine Haven, I supplied. It's called Pine Haven. I know what humans call it. There was something dismissive in his tone, as if the names we gave to places were temporary things, insignificant against the weight of whatever history he carried. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the rain pelting the roof. Questions crowded my mind, each more impossible than the last. I settled on the most pressing. What did you mean earlier about being marked? About my blood carrying a scent. Damon set down his mug with deliberate care. Blood calls to predators, especially the blood of someone like you. Someone like me, I echoed. What does that mean? His gaze grew more intense. Someone who doesn't belong to a pack, who walks alone, vulnerable. The way he said vulnerable sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with my wet hair or the storm outside. I'm not alone, I said defensively. I have friends, a job, an apartment, but no family, he interrupted, the certainty in his voice stopping me cold. No one who would track you if you disappeared in these woods. No one whose blood ties to yours strongly enough to sense your fear or pain. The truth of his words landed like a physical blow. My parents had died when I was young. My grandmother, who'd raised me, passed away during my second year of college. The few friends I had in Pine Haven were casual at best, work acquaintances who might notice my absence but wouldn't immediately sound an alarm. How could you possibly know that? I whispered. I smelled it on you, he said simply. Lone wolves have a particular scent. So do lone humans. I set my mug down with a thud, spilling some of the liquid onto the table. Look, I appreciate the rescue and the dry clothes, but I'm not buying the whole I can smell your life story thing. Who told you about me? Are you some kind of stalker? His expression darkened, a growl rumbling low in his chest that reminded me forcefully of what he truly was beneath the human exterior. I know nothing of you beyond what my senses tell me, he said, voice dropping to a dangerous register. And they tell me you're alone, injured, and marked by blood on land protected by ancient wards against those who would track such things. What things are we talking about? I demanded, frustration overcoming fear. Wolves? Werewolves? What? Others, he said after a long pause. Creatures that hunt without honor, that feed on fear as much as flesh. A chill ran down my spine at the implication that werewolves, his kind, were not the only supernatural beings in or around Blackridge Forest. You're serious, I said, studying his face for any sign of deception. You really believe all this? Belief is for the uncertain. I know what stalks these woods. He leaned forward, forearms resting on the table, bringing his face closer to mine. Just as I know that you, Lena Mitchell, carry something in your blood that should not be possible. My heart stuttered. What are you talking about? Your scent, he said, inhaling deeply as if to confirm his assessment. Beneath the fear and the cheap diner grease and that artificial soap humans use, there's something else. Something that doesn't belong in an ordinary human. I am ordinary, I insisted, but a memory surfaced, my grandmother's strange insistence on certain rituals throughout my childhood. The sachets of herbs she hung above my bed. The silver pendant she gave me on my 16th birthday that I'd lost during the move to Pine Haven. A.S. If reading my thoughts. Damon shook his head slowly. Someone has taken great pains to hide what you are. But blood cannot lie, especially not to those who know how to read its truth. Thunder cracked overhead, so close it seemed to shake the cabin's foundations. One of the lamps flickered out, casting deeper shadows across Damon's face. You should rest, he said abruptly, rising from the table. The bed is yours for tonight. And you? I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. His lips curved in that not-quite smile that revealed nothing of his thoughts. I'll keep watch. There are things that hunt even in storms like this. As if to emphasize his point, a sound rose above the rain and wind, a high, keening call that was neither wolf nor coyote nor any animal I could identify. Damon's head snapped toward the door, his entire body tensing like a predator preparing to strike. What was that? I whispered. His amber eyes met mine, all traces of humanity receding behind something ancient and feral. That, he said quietly, is why you'll stay inside this cabin until morning. No matter what you hear, no matter what calls your name. He moved to the door, checking some marking carved into the wood that I hadn't noticed before. Then he turned back to me, his expression grave. Sleep with this beneath your pillow, he said, removing something from a pouch at his waist and extending it toward me. It was a small, rough-hewn stone with symbols etched into its surface, similar to the markings on the door. When I took it, the stone was unnaturally warm against my palm, as if it generated its own heat. What is it? Protection, he said simply. Something to mask the scent of what flows in your veins until I can figure out what to do with you. Before I could ask what he meant, what to do with me, he'd moved to the hearth, settling cross-legged before the fire, his back straight and vigilant. The conversation was clearly over for now. I retreated to the bed, placing the strange stone beneath the pillow as instructed. As I slipped between furs that smelled of forest and smoke in him, exhaustion crashed over me in a sudden wave. My last conscious thought before sleep claimed me was that I should be more afraid of Damon, of the creature that had made that chilling sound, of the impossible turn my life had taken in a single rainy evening. Instead, in the flickering firelight of a werewolf's den, I felt safer than I had in years at a werewolf romance audiobook. Section 3. Blood Secrets. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I hadn't noticed the night before. Small, thick pane glass set high in the log walls. The storm had passed, leaving behind that particular stillness that follows nature's fury, as if the world itself were catching its breath. For one disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The forest, the wolf, the transformation. Damon Blackridge. I sat up abruptly, the furs falling away. The cabin was empty, the fire reduced to glowing embers. My clothes, now dry, had been folded neatly and placed on a chest near the bed. The borrowed shirt and pants I'd slept in smelled even more strongly of Damon's scent after a night against my skin. As I changed back into my uniform, I tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Part of me wondered if I'd hit my head during the storm, if this cabin and the werewolf who owned it were elaborate hallucinations born of concussion and hypothermia. But the stone beneath my pillow, still unnaturally warm to the touch, felt too real, as did the memory of amber eyes watching me across firelight. The door opened without warning, and Damon filled the frame, fully dressed now in a simple Henley that strained across his broad chest, worn jeans, and boots. Sunlight caught in his black hair, highlighting strands of midnight blue I hadn't noticed in the darkness. In daylight, the scar along his face looked even more brutal, a testament to violence survived. You're awake, he said, his deep voice sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. Just barely. I gestured to my uniform. Thank you for drying my clothes. He shrugged off the gratitude, moving into the cabin with that predatory grace that seemed as natural to him as breathing. Are you hungry? As if on cue, my stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since my shift at the diner the previous afternoon, and that had only been a hastily consumed sandwich between tables. Starving, I admitted. He nodded toward the door. Come outside then. I followed him into the clearing, blinking against the brightness after the cabin's dimness. The forest looked different in daylight, less menacing, more vibrant with life. Birds called from the canopy, and somewhere nearby water burbled over rocks that a small fire pit had been built several yards from the cabin, flames dancing beneath what looked like freshly caught fish on a makeshift spit. My mouth watered at the aroma. You caught breakfast? I asked, impressed despite myself. The stream runs high after rain, he said, gesturing for me to sit on one of the logs positioned around the fire. Fish are easy prey when confused by changing currents. He served the fish on wooden plates, along with what looked like wild berries and some kind of flatbread. I bit into the perfectly cooked flesh, flavor exploding across my tongue. This is amazing, I said between bites. Manners forgotten in the face of hunger and genuinely delicious food. The corner of his mouth twitched in that almost smile I'd glimpsed the night before. City humans forget what real food tastes like. City humans also have indoor plumbing and Netflix, I countered, which has its advantages. You speak as if you're separate from them, he observed, his amber eyes studying me with unsettling intensity. I paused mid-bite. What do you mean? City humans, he quoted. Not we or us. You distance yourself from your own kind, even in speech. The observation struck uncomfortably close to something I'd felt my entire life, a sense of not quite belonging, of watching others from a slight remove, like viewing a conversation through soundproof glass. Force of habit, I said lightly. Occupational hazard of being the weird scholarship kid who served coffee to pay tuition while everyone else partied on daddy's dime. His head tilted slightly, reminding me of the wolf's assessing gaze from our first encounter. You deflect with humor when uncomfortable. Interesting. And you analyze strangers over breakfast fish, I retorted. Also interesting. To my surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe features, briefly revealing a different man beneath the harshness. You have spirit, Lena Mitchell. Most humans who encounter what you did last night would still be shaking with fear. Oh, I'm terrified, I assured him, surprising myself with my honesty. I just happen to be hungry enough that food takes precedence over existential panic. We finished eating in companionable silence, the sun climbing higher in the sky. According to my watch, miraculously still functioning after the downpour. It was just after 8 in the morning. I'd missed the early shift at the diner, which meant Martha, my boss, was probably already composing the lecture I'd receive about responsibility and punctuality. I should get back, I said reluctantly. People will be wondering where I am. A slight exaggeration, but my landlord at least would notice if I didn't appear with the rent check by end of day. Damon nodded, gathering our empty plates. I'll guide you to the forest's edge. I can find my own way, I said, though the thought of navigating Blackridge Forest alone after what I'd learned made my skin crawl. No, he said flatly. You can't. Before I could argue, movement at the edge of the clearing caught my attention. A figure emerged from the trees, a woman, tall and lithe, with copper hair pulled back in a severe braid. She wore hiking clothes that looked far more practical than my diner uniform. But it was her eyes that held me frozen, the same impossible amber as Damon's, another werewolf. Damon, she called, her voice carrying across the clearing. We have a situation. He stiffened beside me, rising to his feet in one fluid motion. Stay here, he ordered me. Before striding to meet the woman halfway across the clearing, they spoke in low, urgent voices. Too quiet for me to catch more than fragments. Boundary markers. Council demands answers. Second incursion this month. The woman's gaze kept flicking to me, her expression a mixture of curiosity and something darker that raised the hair on my arms. Finally, Damon nodded sharply, and the woman melted back into the forest with inhuman speed. Change of plans, he said, returning to where I sat. I need to handle something. You'll stay here until I return. Excuse me. I stood, indignation flaring. I'm not some pet you can order to stay. I have a life to get back to, a job, rent to pay. Your human concerns are irrelevant right now, he said, his voice hardening. Something crossed our boundaries during the storm last night. Something that shouldn't be able to pass the wards. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the strange, keening cry we'd heard. What kind of something? Instead of answering, he moved closer, invading my personal space with deliberate intent. Show me your arm. What? The cut. From the fence. Show me. Confused but compliant, I pushed up my sleeve to reveal the gash from the previous night. Except, there was no gash. Not even a scar or scab. Just smooth, unmarked skin where the wound had been. That's not possible, I whispered, tracing fingers over the spot where I clearly remembered torn flesh and blood. It was deep. It should take days to heal. Damon's expression darkened as he captured my wrist, his touch scorching against my skin. He lifted my arm to his face, inhaling deeply along the inside of my forearm where the wound had been. Your grandmother, he said abruptly. Tell me about her. I tried to pull away, but his grip remained firm. What does my grandmother have to do with anything? Everything, he growled. Her name. Where she came from. What she taught you. Eleanor Mitchell, I said, unnerved by his intensity. She raised me after my parents died. She was eccentric, collected herbs, believed in old remedies. What? His thumb traced circles against my pulse point, the gentle motion at odds with the tension radiating from him. And your mother? What do you remember of her? The question awakened a familiar emptiness, the void where those memories should be. Almost nothing. She died when I was 4. Car accident. And your father? The same accident. I finally managed to extract my wrist from his grip. Look, what is this about? What does my family have to do with? I gestured vaguely at the forest, the cabin, him. Any of this? Damon's gaze was calculating, as if weighing how much to reveal. Your wound healed overnight. Completely. Without scarring. That isn't human. Maybe it wasn't as deep as I thought. I argued, though I knew better. Or maybe your magic stone did something. The stone masks. It doesn't heal. His voice dropped lower. When was the last time you were ill, Lena? Truly sick. Not just tired or sore, but fevered, weakened. The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to answer, then realized I couldn't remember. Not in college, despite the all-nighters and communal living. Not in childhood, though classmates had regularly missed school with flus and colds. That's not. Everyone has a strong immune system, I said weakly. And injuries? Before last night, when was the last time you bled? I remembered a broken glass 3 months earlier, a shard slicing my palm as I cleared a table at the diner. I'd rushed to the bathroom, prepared to rinse a serious cut, only to find a shallow scratch that had stopped bleeding almost immediately. This is crazy, I said, taking a step back. You're suggesting I'm what? Not human. Like you. Not like me, he said, following my retreat until my back hit the cabin wall. He placed a hand on either side of my head, caging me in as he had during our first encounter. Something else. Something that calls to creatures best left undisturbed. His proximity was overwhelming. The heat of his body, the wild scent of him. The intensity in those amber eyes that seemed to see through every defense I'd ever constructed. I don't understand any of this, I whispered. No, he agreed, his voice softening slightly. You wouldn't. Someone went to great lengths to keep you ignorant of your nature. My grandmother, I said, pieces clicking into place. The herbs, the rituals, the pendant she insisted I never remove. Protection, he confirmed. Masking what flows in your veins. But the magic died with her, and now you're exposed. A memory surfaced, my grandmother on her deathbed, gripping my hand with surprising strength. Promise me you'll stay away from old forests, she'd whispered. Promise you'll never walk where ancient trees grow, especially under moonlight. I'd attributed it to the morphine, to the ramblings of a dying woman. Now it seemed like a final, desperate warning. What am I asked, the question barely audible. Damon's expression shifted, something almost gentle crossing his features. One hand moved from the wall to my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone with unexpected tenderness. I don't know, he admitted, but your blood called to me across the forest. It carried notes of power that haven't been scented in these lands for generations. The distant sound of howls interrupted whatever else he might have said. His head snapped toward the forest, body tensing as he dropped his hand from my face. Pack signals, he muttered. They found something. He stepped back, conflict evident in his expression. I have to go, but you. He pointed firmly at me. Stay inside the cabin. The wards will protect you. For how long? I demanded. I can't just hide out in your supernatural bachelor pad indefinitely. Until I return, he said, already striding toward the tree line. Touch nothing, especially the books or jars. Some react, unpredictably to certain bloodlines. Damon, I called after him. You can't just drop you might not be human, and then leave. He paused at the forest's edge, looking back with an expression I couldn't interpret. When I return, we'll conduct a test. Then we'll know for certain what flows in your veins. What kind of test? I asked, not sure I wanted to know the answer. His smile held no humor. The kind that would kill a human. With those comforting words, he disappeared into the forest, leaving me alone with questions that seemed to multiply by the minute and the unsettling possibility that everything I believed about myself might be a carefully constructed lie. I lasted exactly 27 minutes in the cabin before curiosity overwhelmed caution, despite Damon's warning. Or perhaps because of it, the books and jars lining the shelves drew me like magnets. What secrets did they hold? What might they reveal about what I was, if not fully human? The jars came first, glass containers of various sizes filled with dried herbs, powders, and substances I couldn't identify. Each bore a label in elegant, old-fashioned script: wolfsbane, silver ash, moonflower, blood moss. Remedies or weapons? Perhaps both, depending on who or what they were used against. I moved to the books next, running fingers over spines bound in materials that didn't all feel like ordinary leather. The titles were in languages I couldn't read, some that didn't even look like any alphabet I recognized. Except one, a slim volume bound in midnight blue, its title embossed in silver that caught the light filtering through the high windows. Bloodlines of the ancient ones. That my hand hovered over it, Damon's warning echoing in my mind. Some react unpredictably to certain bloodlines. But if I wasn't human, or not entirely, didn't I deserve to know what I was? The distant howls that had summoned Damon had faded. The forest beyond the cabin was silent, as if holding its breath. Decision made. I pulled the book from the shelf. Nothing exploded. No magical alarm sounded. It was just a book, heavy in my hands, the cover cool against my fingertips. I carried it to the table and opened it carefully, as if it might crumble with age. The pages were filled with intricate diagrams, family trees more complex than any I'd seen, branching and reconnecting in patterns that made my eyes hurt if I followed them too long. Names in that same elegant script, some familiar from mythology: Leekin, Fae, Selkie, Druid. Others I'd never encountered: Nepheri, Shadowkin, Bloodwalkers. That I turned pages with increasing frustration. Nothing made sense without context, without knowing what these classifications meant or how they related to me. What had my grandmother been hiding? What had my mother been? The creak of the door sent the book tumbling from my hands. I spun to find Damon filling the entrance, his expression thunderous as he took in the scene. Me? The forbidden book splayed open on the floor. I told you not to touch anything, he growled. Stalking into the cabin, I stood my ground, refusing to cower. You told me I might not be human, then left. Did you really expect me to sit quietly and not look for answers? His jaw tightened. I expected obedience in my territory. Well, I'm not Pack, I shot back. Your alpha commands don't work on me. Something flickered in his amber eyes, surprise, perhaps, that I understood enough about wolf hierarchy to make the reference. He closed the door behind him with deliberate calm and crossed to where the book lay. This one, he said, stooping to retrieve it. Of course it would be this one. Did it react to me? I asked, curiosity overcoming my defiance. No. His brow furrowed as he examined the cover. That's what concerns me. I don't understand. This book is bound in skin from a Shadowkin, a race that despised humans above all others. It reacts violently to human touch. He looked up, fixing me with that penetrating gaze. Yet you held it without consequence. My stomach twisted. So I'm definitely not human? Not entirely. He placed the book on the table rather than returning it to the shelf. But what you are remains unclear. What did you find in the forest? I asked, changing tactics. What crossed your boundaries during the storm? A muscle ticked in his jaw. Nothing good. The tracks disappeared at the stream, deliberately obscured. He ran a hand through his black hair, a surprisingly human gesture of frustration. The council wants answers I don't have. The council, leaders from the 5 packs that share these territories. I am Alpha of Blackridge, but we exist in alliance with others. He sank into one of the chairs, suddenly looking weary. An alliance now under strain because something slipped past our defenses on my watch. I hesitated, then took the seat across from him. And they blame you? They fear change, he said, voice low. Fear what it means when ancient protections fail. There was a weight to his words that suggested history, old conflicts, and older prejudices. I remembered the woman from earlier, her wary assessment when she'd seen me. Because of me, I realized. They think I'm connected to whatever got through. His gaze lifted to mine, unexpectedly direct. Are you? How would I know? I spread my hands in frustration. Until yesterday, I thought werewolves were Halloween costumes and bad movie plots. Now you're telling me there are councils and packs and creatures crossing magical boundaries. And apparently, I'm not even human. It's a lot to process. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Fair enough. Silence fell between us, not entirely uncomfortable. Outside, shadows had begun to lengthen as afternoon slipped toward evening. My stomach growled, reminding me we'd eaten nothing since breakfast. As if reading my thoughts, Damon rose. You need food. What I need are answers. I countered, though I didn't refuse when he retrieved bread and dried meat from a cupboard I hadn't noticed. Answers require understanding, he said, placing the simple meal between us. Understanding requires trust. Do you trust me? I asked, genuinely curious. He considered the question with a seriousness I found oddly touching. I trust that you don't know what you are. Beyond that, he shrugged, the gesture eloquent in its honesty that I appreciated that he didn't lie, didn't offer empty reassurances. How do we build trust then? We start with truth. He tore a piece of bread, offering me half. Ask your questions. I'll answer what I can. The opportunity was too valuable to waste. How old are you? His eyebrow rose slightly. 34. In human years or dog years? The quip escaped before I could stop it. To my surprise, he laughed, that genuine sound that transformed his severe features. Shifters age like humans until maturity, then the process slows. I've seen 34 winters since my birth. And the scar? I asked more softly, gesturing to the mark that ran from temple to jaw. His expression closed immediately, humor vanishing. That's a second date question. Is that what this is? A date? I tried to keep my tone light, but my pulse quickened traitorously. No, he said flatly. This is an interrogation. Your turn to answer. What happened to your parents? The truth. The abrupt shift caught me off balance. I told you, car accident when I was 4. And yet you hesitated when you spoke of your mother, he observed. Your heart rate changed. You believe the story, but some part of you doubts. I stared at him, unsettled by his perception. How could you possibly know that? Shifters sense lies, in speech, in scent, in the cadence of your heartbeat. He leaned forward, eyes intent on mine. What do you remember of that night? Not what you were told, what you remember. I closed my eyes, trying to access memories long buried. Fragments. Rain against windows. My mother's voice, urgent. The smell of something burning. I opened my eyes, finding Damon watching me with unsettling focus. My grandmother never spoke of it. Said it would only cause pain to dwell on tragedy. Or perhaps she feared what you might remember if you looked too closely, he suggested. The thought had never occurred to me, and it sent a chill down my spine. Why would she hide the truth? Protection, he said, the word weighted with meaning. The same reason she used herbs and rituals to mask your scent. The same reason she warned you away from old forests. I startled. How did you know she said that? It's standard advice given to those who wish to hide from creatures who hunt by bloodline. Like you. The question came out sharper than intended. I found you by accident, he corrected. I wasn't hunting. But yes, shifters track by blood scent, among other things. And what about the test you mentioned? I pressed. The one that would kill a human? His expression grew solemn. There are ways to reveal what flows in veins. But they're invasive, painful, and if you were fully human, fatal. So you'd risk killing me to satisfy your curiosity? To protect my pack, he corrected, a hint of alpha authority returning to his voice. If the council demands answers about what crossed our boundaries during the storm, offering them clarity about you might appease them. I had nothing to do with whatever crossed your magical wolf fence. I snapped. Perhaps not consciously. His voice softened unexpectedly. But blood calls to blood, Lena. If there's something in your lineage that connects to older powers, you may have drawn attention without realizing it. I pushed away from the table, needing distance from his intensity. This is insane. Yesterday, I was just a college graduate stuck in a dead-end diner job, trying to pay off student loans. Today I'm some kind of supernatural mystery that might have attracted monsters to your territory. Life changes in an instant, he said, something dark and personal flickering behind his eyes. One moment of crossing the wrong boundary, and everything you thought you knew is gone. The raw emotion in his voice stopped my pacing. There was a story there, perhaps the story behind the scar that carved its way down his face. What happened to you? I asked quietly. He looked away, jaw tight. I was young, arrogant, believed myself invincible, as many young alphas do. I led a patrol into territory not our own, hunting a threat I didn't fully understand. And I lost 3 packmates to creatures that should not exist in this world. His voice had dropped to a near whisper. Their blood is on my hands. The scar is my reminder, earned when I couldn't save my own brother from what waited in the dark. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and painful. Without thinking, I moved back to the table, reaching across to touch his hand where it had clenched into a fist. I'm sorry, I said simply. He looked down at my hand on his, surprise evident in his expression. Then, slowly, he turned his palm upward, his fingers curling around mine. The contact sent warmth spiraling up my arm, a connection that felt deeper than mere touch. You're not afraid of me, he observed quietly. Should I be? I countered. His thumb traced circles against my wrist, just as it had earlier. Most humans would fear what I am, what I can become. I think we've established I'm not entirely human, I said, attempting humor to diffuse the tension crackling between us. No, he agreed, his eyes lifting to mine. You're something far more dangerous. What could be more dangerous than an alpha werewolf? His gaze dropped to our joined hands, then back to my face. A woman who makes him question his duty to the pack. My breath caught at the implication. Before I could respond, he released my hand and stood abruptly, moving to the window as if seeking escape from the moment of vulnerability. Night approaches, he said, his voice once again the controlled alpha. The council meets at moonrise to discuss the boundary breach. I must attend. And me? I asked, still feeling the ghost of his touch on my skin. He turned, his expression conflicted. You should return to your human life. I'll escort you to the forest's edge. What you do with what you've learned is your choice. That's it. I couldn't mask my surprise. Yesterday you were ready to force me through some potentially lethal test. Today you're just letting me go. I am letting you choose, he corrected. Free will matters to shifters, perhaps more than to humans. We are bound by enough natural laws without adding coercion to our sins. I studied him in the fading light, this contradictory man who could shift from predator to protector in a heartbeat, who carried the weight of lost packmates like a physical burden, who had, in his own way, begun to trust me with his truths. And if I choose to learn more? I asked, the question hanging between us. About what I am, about your world. Something flashed in his amber eyes. Hope? Relief? It was gone too quickly to interpret. Then I would advise caution, he said carefully. Knowledge has a price in our world, one you may not be prepared to pay. Let me worry about what I can afford, I said, stepping closer to him. You're not the only one with secrets, Damon Blackridge. My entire life has apparently been one. I deserve to know the truth. He studied me for a long moment, something like respect mingling with concern in his gaze. Then he nodded once, the gesture decisive. After the council meeting, he said, if you truly wish to learn what you are, meet me here at midnight. Bring something that belonged to your grandmother, something personal, imbued with her essence. What? Because, he said grimly, if we're going to risk your life to uncover your bloodline, we should at least have a connection to the woman who tried so hard to hide it. The journey back to Pine Haven felt surreal, like walking between worlds that were never meant to touch. Damon had guided me silently through the forest, maintaining a careful distance that hadn't been there earlier. Whatever connection had formed in the cabin seemed to fray with each step toward human civilization at the forest's edge, where ancient oaks gave way to the newer growth that bordered the town's hiking trails. He stopped. I go no further, he said, his voice neutral. Follow this path. It will lead you to the east side of town. Thank you. The words felt inadequate for everything that had transpired since our first meeting in the storm, that he merely nodded, amber eyes scanning the tree line as if expecting threats to materialize. Remember, midnight. If you choose to return. If, I repeated, though we both knew my decision was already made. I couldn't walk away from the truth about myself, not when it had been hidden from me my entire life. One more thing, he said as I turned to leave. Tell no one what you've seen, what you know. Who would believe me? I asked with a rueful smile. His expression remained deadly serious. Some would, and those are the ones you should fear most. With those ominous words hanging between us, he melted back into the shadows of Blackridge Forest, leaving me alone at the boundary between his world and mine. The afternoon passed in a blur of normalcy, so jarring it felt like a dream. I apologized to Martha at the diner, fabricating a story about a flooded apartment that had required emergency attention. I paid my landlord the rent, emptying my meager savings account in the process. I showered, changed clothes, ate a microwave dinner that tasted like cardboard after Damon's simple but flavorful forest fare. All the while, my mind churned with questions. What was I, if not fully human? What had my grandmother been protecting me from? And why did the thought of returning to that cabin, to him, fill me with both trepidation and inexplicable longing? As night fell, I searched my small apartment for something of my grandmother's that might serve Damon's mysterious purpose. There wasn't much. Most of her possessions had been sold to pay for her final medical bills. But in a shoebox at the back of my closet, I found a small carved wooden box I'd inherited, the one thing I'd insisted on keeping. Inside were a few treasures: her wedding ring, a lock of silver hair tied with ribbon, and a small leather pouch containing what looked like dried herbs. The pouch seemed most relevant, given what I now knew about her protective rituals. I tucked it into my pocket along with the ring, just to be certain. At 11:30, I pulled on a warm jacket and sturdy boots, then hesitated before grabbing a small canister of pepper spray. It wouldn't do much against a werewolf, but it made me feel marginally more prepared for whatever waited in the forest. The night was clear and cold, stars pricking the velvet darkness above Pine Haven's sleepy streets. Few people were out this late on a weeknight, making it easy to slip unseen toward the eastern trailhead. Once past the town's lights, I clicked on my flashlight, its beam weak compared to the vastness of the forest ahead. Halfway to our meeting point, I sensed rather than heard that I was not alone. The feeling of being watched prickled along my spine, raising goosebumps that had nothing to do with the night's chill. I stopped, scanning the trees with my inadequate light. "Damon," I called softly, hoping it was him. Following to ensure my safety, that a low growl answered from somewhere to my right. Not Damon's familiar rumble, but something higher-pitched and hungry. My pulse spiked, instinctive fear flooding my system, that I began walking faster, no longer concerned with stealth. The growl came again, closer this time, accompanied by the crack of underbrush. Something was pacing me, tracking my movement. A shape darted across the path ahead, wolf-like, but wrong somehow. Its movements too jerky, its form too elongated. I froze, pepper spray clutched uselessly in my trembling hand. Another shape joined the first, then a third. They circled slowly into view, and my breath caught in my throat. They resembled wolves in the same way gargoyles resembled angels, a twisted, nightmarish version of the natural form. Their fur was patchy, revealing grayish skin beneath. Their muzzles were too long, filled with jagged teeth that protruded at unnatural angles. And their eyes, God, their eyes, glowed a sickly green in the darkness, pupilless and hungry, not werewolves. Something else entirely. Human, hissed a voice that should not have come from an animal's throat. "Smells wrong. Smells like power." They could speak. The realization hit me with a wave of fresh terror. "Not yours to take," said another, its jaw moving in a grotesque approximation of human speech. "Promised to us. Payment for crossing." My back hit a tree. I hadn't realized I'd been retreating until I felt the rough bark through my jacket. The creatures advanced, spreading out to cut off escape routes. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the fear coursing through me. "I haven't promised anything to anyone." "Blood promises," said the first creature, slinking closer. "Old promises. Before you were born. Before Mother was born," added another with a sound like laughter. "Grandmother knew. Grandmother hid you. But she's gone now, and the debt remains." They knew about my grandmother. About me. Whatever these things were, they were connected to the secrets that had been kept from me my entire life. "What debt?" I demanded, desperate to keep them talking rather than attacking. "What promise?" The largest of the three reared up on its hind legs, its form elongating further until it stood nearly as tall as a man, though still hideously wolfish. "Safe passage," it growled. "Protection from hunters. In exchange for firstborn daughter when she comes of age." "That's insane," I said, though a terrible suspicion was forming in my mind. "My grandmother would never." "Not grandmother," interrupted the creature. "Great-grandmother. When she fled across the sea with her secrets. With her tainted blood." Tainted blood. The words echoed what Damon had suggested, that something in my lineage was not human, something old and powerful enough to interest creatures like these. "Whatever arrangement she made," I said carefully, "I'm not bound by it." I never agreed. "Blood agrees," said the smallest of the three, circling behind me. "Blood always agrees. We've waited long enough." They tensed to spring, and I knew with cold certainty that my pepper spray and desperate pleas would not save me. I closed my eyes, bracing for the attack that never came. Instead, a roar of pure fury shattered the night, a sound so primal it seemed to shake the very ground beneath my feet. My eyes flew open in time to see a massive black shape crash into the circle of creatures, scattering them with the force of its attack. Damon. His wolf form was even larger than I remembered. Midnight fur bristling as he positioned himself between me and the threat. The twisted wolf creatures regrouped quickly, hissing their displeasure. "Alpha," spat the leader. "This is not pack business. The girl belongs to us by ancient right." Damon's growl deepened, his massive body coiled to strike again. "We have waited generations," continued the creature, its grotesque approximation of speech growing more fluid as it addressed Damon. "Since her ancestor crossed from the old world to the new. The council knows of our claim. They cannot interfere." Council. The same council Damon had mentioned, the one meeting tonight. Had they known what waited for me in the forest? Had they planned this? Damon's form blurred suddenly, that same shimmering distortion I'd witnessed during our first encounter. Where the wolf had stood, the man now crouched, naked and lethal with rage barely contained. "She is under my protection," he snarled, voice rough with the remnants of his wolf form. "By my right as Alpha of Blackridge territory. You claim her." The lead creature seemed genuinely surprised, without knowing what flows in her veins. "I claim her," Damon confirmed, the words carrying a weight I didn't fully understand. "Now leave my territory before I tear you apart piece by rotting piece." The creatures conferred among themselves in hisses and guttural sounds no human throat could produce. Finally, the leader turned back to us. "The Alpha's claim supersedes old debts. For now." Its lipless mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. "But when her blood awakens fully, when she becomes what she is meant to be, our claim returns. She will call to us herself." "Leave," Damon commanded, his voice laden with supernatural authority. The creatures backed away, their movements jerky and unnatural, like puppets with half their strings cut. At the edge of the clearing, the leader paused. "Ask her about the dreams," it said, green eyes fixed on me with terrible knowing. "Ask her what calls to her when the moon is dark." Then they were gone, melting into the shadows with a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. For several heartbeats, neither of us moved. Damon remained crouched protectively before me, his breathing harsh in the sudden silence. Then he turned, amber eyes searching my face. "Are you hurt?" he asked, rising to his full height, apparently unconcerned with his nudity. That I shook my head, still too shocked to form words. "What were you thinking?" he demanded, anger replacing concern. "Coming into the forest alone at night? You told me to meet you at midnight." I reminded him, finding my voice at last. "At the cabin," he growled, "where the wards protect against exactly this kind of incursion. Not wandering halfway through unprotected territory." "I was trying to get to the cabin," I said defensively. "How was I supposed to know those things?" "Would be waiting. They've been waiting for generations, according to their claim." His eyes narrowed. "What did they mean about dreams when the moon is dark?" I looked away, uncomfortable with the question for reasons I couldn't articulate. "I don't know, Lena." His voice softened as he stepped closer, one hand coming up to tilt my face back toward his. "This is important. Do you dream during the new moon?" The gentleness in his touch contrasted sharply with his urgent tone. I found myself leaning into his palm, seeking comfort after the terror of the encounter. "Yes," I admitted. "The same dream. Every dark moon since I was 13. I'm in a forest, not this one, somewhere older, with strange stone circles half hidden among the trees. Someone is calling my name, but I can never find them. I just keep walking deeper until I wake up." Something like resignation crossed his features. "The forest of Thornhallow," he murmured. "Beyond the veil. You know it?" I asked, startled. "It exists in the old stories. A place where boundaries between worlds are thin." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, the gesture unconsciously tender. "A place where the Fae once ruled." Fae. Like fairies. I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice, even after everything I'd seen. "Not the diminutive creatures from your children's tales," he corrected. "The old ones. Powerful, dangerous, and supposedly extinct in this realm for centuries." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the night air. "Are you saying I'm saying," he interrupted, dropping his hand from my face, "that whatever blood flows in your veins has drawn the attention of creatures beyond my knowledge, which makes you either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous to my kind. And which am I to you?" I asked quietly. His expression became unreadable. "That's what the council intends to determine tonight." The council? A horrible suspicion formed. Did they know those things would come for me? Damon's silence was answer enough. It was a test. I realized, anger replacing fear. They wanted to see what would happen if I entered the forest alone. "Not my test," he said firmly. "I was told you would remain safely in town until midnight. That I would bring you to the council myself. Then someone set us both up," I concluded. "Someone who knew what those creatures wanted." A howl rose in the distance, different from the twisted sounds of the creatures we'd encountered. This was a wolf's call, clean and purposeful. "We're summoned," Damon said grimly. "The council knows what happened here." "How?" "They've been watching." He gestured toward the trees where I now noticed subtle movements. Wolves positioned as sentinels. "My claim has forced their hand. Now we must face them together." "Your claim?" I repeated. What exactly did that mean? For the first time since I'd met him, Damon looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. "It means I've tied your fate to mine in the eyes of pack law. For better or worse, you're under my protection now. And if the council rejects that protection?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "The right of revelation carries its own price. Young Alpha," he said, voice rough with age. "Are you prepared to pay it if what emerges proves dangerous to our kind?" "I am," Damon answered without hesitation. The weight of that simple affirmation settled over me like a physical thing. Whatever he had committed to on my behalf, it was no small matter. "And you, unnamed one," said the wooden woman, fixing me with eyes like amber sap. "Do you consent to the revelation of your blood? To learn what has been hidden from you since birth?" I swallowed hard, acutely aware that every being in the circle could probably hear my pounding heart. "Yes," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I consent." "Then let it be done." She raised gnarled hands to the sky. "Bring forth the elements of revelation." For council members stepped down from their thrones, approaching the fire. Each carried something. A clay bowl of water, a handful of earth, a burning brand, and a feather. Only the shadow figure remained seated, observing from its throne. "Blood reveals truth," intoned the wooden woman. "Blood remembers what mind forgets. Blood carries the echoes of all who came before." "Do you have something of your ancestor?" Damon asked me quietly. "The grandmother who protected you." I nodded, reaching into my pocket for the small leather pouch and silver ring I'd brought. The stone elder, a female, I realized as she moved closer, held out massive hands. "The personal items first," she rumbled, "that we may connect the bloodlines across generations." I placed my grandmother's possessions in her stone palms, watching as she crushed the dried herbs into dust and melted the silver ring with a touch of her fiery hand, forming a small pool of liquid metal in her palm. These she added to the clay bowl, the water being held. "Now your blood," said the ancient wolf, producing a bone knife with a wickedly sharp edge. "Freely given for the knowing." I glanced at Damon, whose expression had gone carefully neutral. He gave a slight nod, reassurance in his amber eyes. Steeling myself, I extended my hand. The old wolf drew the blade across my palm with surprising gentleness. I watched, mesmerized, as drops of my blood fell into the bowl, striking the liquid silver and creating spirals of crimson that didn't mix but formed distinct patterns. "Blood remembers," murmured the wooden woman. "Blood knows." The water being raised the bowl, adding something from a vial at its waist, a liquid that shimmered like starlight. Then it passed the bowl to the fire, who heated it from beneath until steam rose in curling tendrils. What happened next defied explanation. The steam formed shapes above the bowl, not random patterns, but distinct images that hung in the air between us. A forest unlike any I'd seen in America, ancient and mist-shrouded. A woman with my grandmother's eyes fleeing through night-dark trees, a bundle clutched to her chest. A ship crossing stormy seas. A child, my mother, with unnaturally bright eyes and a silver gleam to her skin in moonlight, and behind it all, a presence I felt rather than saw, watching, waiting, calling. The shadow figure finally rose, approaching the steam images with a grace that suggested it barely touched the ground. "Fey blood," it whispered, confirming what Damon had suspected. "High Court." Royal lineage, diluted by human breeding, but still potent. Hidden by old magic, but awakening now. Gasps rippled through the gathering. Several of the Sylvan hissed, backing away as if I carried contagion. Impossible, said Kira, her voice sharp with disbelief. The Fey courts were sealed away centuries ago, their portals closed, their bloodlines hunted to extinction in this realm. Not extinction, corrected the shadow being. Hiding. This one's great-grandmother fled the culling, carrying royal blood, an unborn child to the human world. The Shadow Walkers must have aided her escape. For a price. Her firstborn daughter. I murmured, remembering the creature's claims. But they didn't just want any descendant. They wanted me specifically. What? The wooden woman studied the still-forming images in the steam. Because you are the 7th generation. Magic runs in 7s and 3s. You are the culmination, the one in whom the diluted blood runs pure again. Which makes her a beacon, Damon said grimly. To anything that remembers the old powers. And explains the boundary breaches, added the water being. The veil's thin around one, with royal Fey blood. Especially as she approaches her awakening. I felt dizzy with the implications, questions tumbling through my mind faster than I could voice them. Awakening? What does that mean? And why doesn't any of this feel real to me? If I'm part Fey, shouldn't I feel different? Have powers or something? Your grandmother's protections, Damon explained gently. The herbs, the rituals, they weren't just to hide your scent. They were suppressing your nature. But they're failing now, observed the Stone Elder. Without renewal, such bindings weaken after death. Which leaves us with a decision, said the ancient wolf. His milky eye fixed unervingly on me. What to do with a half-blooded Fey princess awakening in our territories? The shadow figure circled me slowly, its darkness occasionally brushing my skin with cold that penetrated to the bone. Traditional law is clear, it whispered. Such beings are too dangerous to allow among us. The veil could collapse entirely. She's under my protection, Damon growled, stepping closer to me. My claim supersedes traditional law. Your claim, said the wooden woman thoughtfully, may be more fitting than you realized, young alpha. What do you mean? I asked, finding my voice again. Wolves and Fey share ancient bonds, she explained. Before the Great Sundering, before the courts were sealed away, High Fey often took wolf guardians. The strongest pairings became bloodbound, creating alliances that transcended realm boundaries. Understanding dawned in Damon's expression. That's why I scented her across the forest. Why her blood called to me specifically. The old magics recognized patterns, agreed the water being. If there is to be a Fey awakening in our time, perhaps it is fitting that a wolf alpha stand as guardian. The council members exchanged glances, some sort of silent communication passing between them. Finally, the ancient wolf spoke. We will permit the claim to stand, he announced. Damon Blackridge will serve as guardian to the Fey blood during her awakening. But, his voice hardened, should her powers threaten our territories or draw enemies we cannot defeat, both will answer to council justice. And the Shadow Walkers' claim? Asked Kira. Blood debts cannot simply be dismissed. They may petition the council directly, ruled the Stone Elder. Until then, the Alpha's claim takes precedence on Blackridge land. With that pronouncement, something shifted in the air around us, a subtle realignment of energies that raised goosebumps along my arms. The gathered representatives began to disperse, moving away in small groups, many casting curious or wary glances in my direction. Damon's hand found mine, his warmth anchoring me as the implications of everything I'd learned threatened to overwhelm me. Half-Fey, royal bloodline, awakening powers. It was too much to process. What happens now? I asked him quietly as the council members returned to their thrones. Now we prepare, he said, his voice equally low. Your awakening has already begun. That's why the protective magic is failing. We need to control the process before it controls you. How long do we have? His amber eyes met mine, concern evident in their depths. The final phase typically aligns with the dark of the moon, when the veil between realms is thinnest. That's less than 2 weeks away, I calculated, remembering the moon's current phase. Yes. His thumb brushed across my knuckles in that now familiar gesture of comfort. Which means we have much to do, and little time to do it. The wooden woman approached us, her bark-like features arranged in what might have been a smile. The blood knows its path, she said cryptically, even when the mind forgets. She held out a gnarled hand, offering me a small object. It was my grandmother's ring, transformed. What had been a simple silver band was now an intricate circle of metal that seemed to shift between silver and something else, something that caught light in ways that shouldn't be possible. At its center nestled a stone of deep blue, like twilight captured in crystal. A token of your heritage, she explained, and the beginning of your protection. Were it always. I slipped it onto my finger, expecting it to be too large as the original had been. Instead, it adjusted seamlessly to my size, warming against my skin as if greeting an old friend. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved by the unexpected gift. She nodded once, then turned to Damon. Guardian and guarded. An old pattern emerges anew. Remember the ancient ways, wolf. When the moon goes dark and the veil thins, stand between her and the calling of her blood. With those enigmatic words, she returned to her throne, leaving us to contemplate their meaning. Let's go, Damon said, his hand pressing gently at the small of my back. Dawn approaches, and there's much to explain before it breaks. As we turned to leave the stone circle, I caught sight of a figure watching from the shadows beyond the firelight, the copper-haired woman. Kira, her expression unreadable as she observed our departure. When our eyes met, she didn't look away, but raised her hand in what might have been warning or acknowledgement. Then Damon led me back into the forest, away from the council clearing and toward whatever future awaited a diner waitress with royal Fey blood, and the werewolf who had claimed her protection, not a future that, for better or worse, we would face together. The days following the council meeting passed in a blur of revelation and preparation. I'd taken an emergency leave of absence from the diner, a decision Martha accepted with surprising ease after one look at my haunted expression. My small apartment sat abandoned, rent paid through the month, but otherwise forgotten as I moved into Damon's cabin. It was temporary, we both insisted. A necessity while he taught me to control the Fey blood awakening within me. Each morning began with meditation beside the stream that ran near his cabin, exercises designed to help me sense the energies Damon claimed flowed through all living things. Each afternoon brought lessons in the history of the supernatural world that had existed alongside humanity for millennia without most people ever knowing. Each evening ended with practical training, how to direct the unpredictable bursts of power that had begun manifesting at inconvenient moments, like now. Focus, Damon instructed as I struggled to control the small whirlwind that had formed between my outstretched palms. Intent shapes power. Tell it what you want. I'm trying. I gritted through clenched teeth, sweat beading on my forehead despite the cool autumn air. The miniature cyclone wobbled, picking up leaves and debris from the forest floor, growing rather than diminishing as I attempted to contain it. Don't fight it, he said, circling me slowly. Work with it. The elements respond to emotion as much as will. That's not helping. I snapped, frustration mounting as the whirlwind expanded further, now strong enough to pull at my hair and clothing. Damon moved behind me, his chest against my back, arms extending alongside mine. Breathe with me, he murmured, his voice a low rumble I could feel through my spine. Match my rhythm. I tried to synchronize my breathing with his, conscious of his warmth, his scent, the steady beat of his heart against my shoulder blades. The awareness of him momentarily distracted me from my frustration, and the whirlwind began to calm. There, he encouraged softly. Now imagine gathering it back into yourself, like drawing thread onto a spool. I visualized exactly that. And to my surprise, the wind responded, spiraling inward, growing smaller until it collapsed into a pinpoint of energy that I could feel humming beneath my breastbone. I did it, I breathed, amazed at the sensation. You did. Pride colored his voice as he stepped back, breaking the contact that had steadied me. Your control improves daily. But it wasn't enough, and we both knew it. The dark moon was only 3 days away, and my incidents were becoming more frequent, more powerful. Yesterday, I'd shattered every glass in the cabin when Kira had arrived unannounced, something about her presence triggering a surge of defensive energy I couldn't control. The day before, I'd accidentally created ice crystals across the entire stream when Damon had pushed me too hard during practice. It's still not consistent, I said, turning to face him. And we're running out of time. A shadow crossed his features. We'll be ready. How can you be so sure? We don't even know exactly what's going to happen when the moon goes dark. I sank down onto a fallen log, suddenly exhausted. Using these new abilities, or rather, trying to control them, drained me in ways I hadn't thought possible. Damon remained standing, his posture suggesting a restlessness he rarely displayed. Something had been bothering him since dawn, a tension I couldn't quite identify. The council sent word, he finally said. The Shadow Walkers have formally challenged my claim on you. Cold dread pooled in my stomach. What does that mean exactly? It means they're invoking ancient law, demanding the blood debt be honored despite my protection. He ran a hand through his black hair, a gesture I now recognized as frustration. They claim your great-grandmother's promise supersedes pack law. And what does the council say? His jaw tightened. They're considering the petition. Considering, I stood again, anger flaring. I'm not property to be traded or claimed or handed over. In their world, our world, blood promises carry binding power, he explained, though I could tell by his expression that he shared my outrage. Especially those made by Fey royalty, which apparently your ancestor was. So I could just be given to those creatures? Because of something someone did generations before I was born. He moved closer, taking my hands in his. I won't let that happen. The intensity in his amber eyes should have reassured me, but a new fear was forming, one I couldn't quite articulate. What aren't you telling me, Damon? He hesitated, and in that moment I knew whatever came next would change everything between us. There's one way to make my claim unassailable, he said carefully. A binding that even the Shadow Walkers couldn't challenge. What kind of binding? I asked, though something instinctive within me already knew the answer. A true mating. The ancient way, with blood and magic, before the dark moon rises. His thumbs traced circles on my wrists, a familiar gesture that now carried new weight. It would bind your fate to mine permanently. Make you Luna of Blackridge Pack. My breath caught. Luna, you mean like your wife? More than wife, he corrected. Life partner. Other half. In wolf culture, the Alpha and Luna are bound beyond human marriage. Souls connected, power shared. It's rare. Sacred. I pulled my hands from his, needing distance to think clearly. Let me get this straight. You're proposing we get magically married, something supposedly sacred and rare, just to prevent the Shadow Walkers from claiming me? His expression hardened. That's not. 3 weeks ago, I didn't know you existed. I interrupted. I didn't know I was part Fae, or that werewolves were real, or that ancient blood debts could determine my future. And now you're suggesting we bind our souls together? Forever. To protect you. He insisted, though something flashed in his eyes that suggested other motivations. Is that the only reason? I challenged, stepping closer. Because you made a claim to the council that you're now obligated to uphold. No, he growled, the words seeming torn from him. You know it's not. And I did know. Despite everything, the chaos, the fear, the rapid reshaping of my reality, something undeniable had grown between us. Something I felt in the way his eyes followed me, in the careful way he guided my training, in the heat that sparked whenever we touched. But was it enough to base a lifetime bond upon? A bond that, according to what he'd taught me, couldn't be broken without destroying both participants? This isn't just about protection, I said more softly. A decision like this should come from love. From choice freely made, not necessity or obligation. And if I told you it is from... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words that didn't come easily to him. If I told you these weeks have shown me what you are to me, what you could be. My heart stuttered at the naked emotion in his voice. But before I could respond, movement at the edge of the clearing caught my attention. Kira stood watching us, her copper hair gleaming in the late afternoon sun. The expression on her face sent warning signals through my body, not the usual wariness she displayed toward me, but something darker, more urgent. The elders request your presence, she announced, her gaze fixed on her brother. Immediately, both of you. Damon's posture shifted instantly, alert to the tension in his sister's voice. What's happened? The Shadow Walkers brought evidence before the council. Her amber eyes flicked to me, then back to Damon. About her bloodline. About what truly happened when her ancestor fled the Fey realm. Cold dread replaced the warmth that had been building within me. What evidence? Instead of answering, Kira withdrew something from a pouch at her waist. A crystal that gleamed with inner light. pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Memory stone, Damon explained, his voice tight. It captures and preserves experiences, emotions, truths that can't be falsified. Kira held the stone toward me. The council has authorized a preliminary viewing. Before formal hearing, I glanced at Damon, who nodded almost imperceptibly. With shaking fingers, I reached for the crystal. The moment my skin contacted its smooth surface, the world dissolved around me. I was no longer in the forest clearing but running through mist-shrouded woods, heart pounding with fear and desperate hope. I felt the weight of pregnancy in my body, the burn of exhaustion in my legs, the terror of pursuit. These weren't my memories. They belonged to my great-grandmother, the Fey Royal who had fled to the human world. Images flashed faster. A bargain struck in darkness with twisted wolf-like creatures, the Shadow Walkers. A promise sealed in blood. Safe passage to the human realm in exchange for the seventh-generation daughter, when Fey blood would run pure again. But there was more. A reason for her desperate flight. Betrayal. She had stolen something in her escape. Something precious and forbidden. A vial of essence from the heart of the Fey realm, the concentrated power meant for royal ceremonies. Power that, if wielded by mortal hands during the thin times when veils between worlds weakened, could tear those veils completely. Power she had hidden within her bloodline, to be carried through generations. Dormant until the seventh daughter reached maturity. Power that now surged through my veins. Awakening with each passing day, with a gasp, I dropped the crystal, finding myself back in the forest clearing. Damon's concerned face before mine, his hands steadying my shoulders. What did you see? He asked urgently. She stole something. I whispered, horror dawning as implications became clear. The Fey essence, she hid it in our bloodline. In me. Kira's expression was grim satisfaction. As the Shadow Walkers claimed, you're not just Fey-blooded. You're a vessel for stolen power that could collapse the barriers between realms. I didn't know, I said weakly, still reeling from the memory vision. Ignorance doesn't change what you are, she replied, her voice hardening. What your awakening could unleash. Damon's grip on my shoulders tightened protectively. This changes nothing about my claim. It changes everything, brother. Kira's eyes reflected genuine regret beneath her resolute expression. The council has revoked your guardianship. She's to be contained until they determine how to proceed. Contain, I echoed, fear crawling up my spine. What does that mean? Damon released me abruptly, turning to face his sister with a growl building in his chest. They can't override an alpha's claim without unanimous vote. They had it, Kira replied softly. Even the wolf elder agreed. The risk is too great. And if I refuse? He challenged, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that raised the hair on my arms. Then you stand against all 5 territories. She straightened. Her own authority, as what I now knew was his second-in-command, evident in her posture. Against your own pack, Damon. Is she worth that price? The question hung in the air between them. Siblings bound by blood and pack loyalty, now divided by his protection of me. I saw the conflict raging in Damon's eyes, the impossible choice before him. Me or everything he had ever known, ever led, ever protected. There has to be another way, I said, breaking the tense silence. If the problem is this, essence, inside me, can it be removed? Contained separately? Not without killing you, Kira answered bluntly. It's bound to your life force now, woven through your very being. Then what does the council intend? Damon demanded. If they've revoked my claim, what's their solution? Kira's hesitation told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke the words. Stasis, she finally said. A deep magical sleep until a permanent solution can be found. She would be kept in the sacred grove, guarded by all 5 territories in rotation. Imprisoned, I translated, anger warring with growing despair. Protected, she corrected. From yourself as much as from those who would use you. How long? Damon's voice was deadly quiet. Kira wouldn't meet his eyes. As long as necessary. Which could be forever, I concluded. A magical coma for eternity because of something I never asked for, never knew about. The alternative is worse, she insisted. If the Shadow Walkers claim you, they'll extract the essence by force. The process would consume you entirely, mind, body, soul. At least in stasis, you'll know nothing, feel nothing. An existence without consciousness, without choice or growth or feeling. A living death. No, Damon said, the single word vibrating with alpha power. I won't allow it. Kira's expression softened with genuine sorrow. It's not your decision anymore, brother. The council sends me only as courtesy, for our blood bond. Their enforcers approach even now. As if summoned by her words, I became aware of movement in the forest around us. Shadows that weren't shadows, presences that radiated cold purpose. The council hadn't trusted Damon to surrender me willingly. They were right. With blinding speed, he shifted forms, massive black wolf interposing itself between me and the approaching enforcers. His growl echoed through the clearing, a challenge and a warning. Don't, Kira pleaded. They'll kill you. Damon, the pack needs its alpha. Watching him, proud, fierce, ready to fight impossible odds for my freedom, I made my decision. Stop, I said, placing a hand on his wolf shoulder. I'll go willingly. He turned his massive head toward me, amber eyes questioning, disbelieving. I won't be the reason you die, I told him softly, or the reason you lose everything that matters to you. He shifted back to human form in that fluid motion I'd come to admire, heedless of his nakedness as he gripped my arms. Nothing matters more than you, he said fiercely. We'll run. I know places beyond council reach, and live as fugitives forever. I shook my head, tears threatening. They're right about one thing, Damon. Whatever's awakening in me is dangerous. I can feel it growing stronger each day. If I lose control when the dark moon rises, I can help you control it, he insisted. The mating bond would stabilize your energies, give you anchor, a bond you offered out of necessity. I reminded him gently, though the words cut me deeply. Not love. Pain flashed across his features. Lena, time's up, came a new voice, deep, resonant, belonging to one of the stone skin who had emerged from the treeling. Others followed, representatives from each territory, their expressions implacable. The vessel comes with us now. Vessel, not person, not woman, just container for stolen power, and I stepped back from Damon, creating distance he could have easily closed but didn't, respecting my choice even as it visibly tore him apart. When this is over, he said, his voice rough with emotion he rarely displayed. When they find another solution, I will come for you, no matter how long it takes. The promise lodged in my heart like a blade, hope and pain in equal measure. I reached up, touching his face, tracing the scar that had fascinated me since our first meeting. I release you from your claim, I whispered, the formal words coming from somewhere deep within my awakening Fey nature. You owe me nothing. Before he could protest, I turned away, walking toward the waiting council enforcers with my head high, refusing to let him see the tears that finally spilled over. Better a clean break. Better he remember me walking away proud than being dragged away broken. The stone skin placed cold hands on my shoulders to guide me deeper into the forest, toward whatever magical prison awaited. I felt Damon's eyes burning into my back, felt the howl building in his chest. Before it tore from his throat, a sound of such raw anguish it seemed to shake the very trees around us. The sound of a wolf losing what he had only just found. What? I had denied him the chance to claim as his own that a werewolf romance. Audiobook Section 8. Moonless awakening. The sacred grove was beautiful, in its way. Ancient trees formed a natural cathedral around a pool of water, so still it mirrored the sky perfectly. Luminescent flowers bloomed despite the autumn season, casting gentle light across stone benches arranged in a circle. In the center stood a raised platform of white marble, carved with symbols I now recognized as wards of containment and sleep, an MY prison, for however long the council deemed necessary that I had been here 2 days. 2 days of preparation, of explanations delivered in tones ranging from sympathetic to coldly practical. 2 days of fighting the growing power that surged beneath my skin with each setting sun, drawing closer to the dark moon that would trigger my full awakening. Tonight was that night. The moon would not rise. The veil between worlds would thin to gossamer, and I would be placed in magical stasis before whatever lurked in my bloodline could fully emerge. It's time, said a gentle voice behind me. I turned to find the wooden woman, Elder Willow, I had learned, watching me with those amber eyes that reminded me painfully of Damon's. Can I have a few more minutes? I asked, gazing up at the darkening sky, to feel the stars one last time before. She nodded, bark-like features softening with what might have been compassion. A few minutes only. The ritual must begin at true dark. As she retreated to join the other elders gathering at the edge of the grove, I closed my eyes, drawing a deep breath of night air. Despite everything, despite knowing what awaited me, I couldn't help marveling at how much more vivid the world had become since my Fey blood began awakening. Scents carried stories. Colors held music. The whisper of wind through leaves sounded like conversations just beyond understanding. Was this what I would lose? This heightened connection to everything around me? Would I dream in my magical sleep, or simply cease to exist as consciousness while my body remained as vessel for stolen power? There had to be another way. I whispered to the gathering darkness. There is, came a voice, low, familiar, impossible. My eyes flew open. Damon stood at the edge of the pool, half concealed by shadow, his amber eyes luminous in the gloom. What are you doing here? I hissed, glancing anxiously toward the elders. They'll kill you. Let them try. He moved closer, his movements silent despite his size. I couldn't let you face this alone. You shouldn't have come, I insisted, even as my treacherous heart leapt at the sight of him. I released you from your claim. You owe me nothing. This has nothing to do with claims or debts. He reached me in 2 strides, hands coming up to cradle my face with a gentleness that belied his fierce expression, and everything to do with what I couldn't say before. What I should have said the moment I knew. My breath caught. Damon, I love you, he said, the words rough with emotion. Not out of obligation. Not for protection. I love your courage and your strength, and the way you faced impossible truths without breaking. I love how you challenge me and see me, not just the alpha, but the man. I love you, Lena Mitchell, half-Fey princess with stolen power in her veins. Tears sprang to my eyes, blurring his beloved face. Why now? When it's too late. It's never too late while breath remains. His thumbs brushed away my tears. I found another way. A risk, but better than eternal sleep. Hope fluttered dangerously in my chest. What wet? The mating bond, he said urgently. Not just as protection from shadow walkers, but as anchor for your awakening. My wolf nature can ground your Fey essence. Channel it safely through the dark moon. The council rejected that option. I reminded him. They said the risk was too great. Because they fear what they don't understand. His eyes burned with conviction. The old texts speak of such bonds. Fey and wolf, magic and earth, sky and ground. Balancing forces, not opposing ones. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement, the elders approaching, having noticed the intruder in their sacred space. They're coming, I whispered. Choose, Lena, Damon said fiercely. Your fate, your heart, no one else's to decide. Time seemed to slow as I stood at the crossroads of my future. Eternal sleep, safe, but empty. Or risk everything on a bond that might save me, or destroy us both if it failed. But wasn't that love? The willingness to risk everything? Yes, I breathed, feeling something deep within me recognize the rightness of it. I choose you. Relief and joy transformed his features for one beautiful moment before determination returned. We'll need to move fast. Too late. The elders and their enforcers had reached us, power gathering around them like storm clouds. This is council ground. Wolf, rumbled the stone elder. You have no authority here, and you have no right to imprison an innocent woman for crimes she didn't commit, Damon countered, positioning himself protectively before me. Stand down. Alpha, warned the ancient wolf elder. Your interference violates our unanimous ruling. I challenge that ruling, Damon declared formally. By right of blood claim, an ancient covenant between wolf and Fey. A murmur rippled through the gathered representatives. Elder Willow stepped forward, her wooden features creased with concern. Such a challenge requires precedent, she said. The bond you propose has not existed in living memory. Yet it existed, he insisted. Before the sundering of realms, when Fey and wolf walked as allies. When balance was maintained through union, not separation. I felt a strange vibration building beneath my feet. Not from the elders gathering power, but from something deeper. The ground itself seemed to respond to Damon's words, as if ancient magic stirred at their mention. The dark moon rises, intoned the shadow figure, its voice carrying despite its softness. We have no time for debates on ancient history. The vessel must be contained before Whatever else it meant to say was lost as a pulse of energy burst from the pool behind us. The mirror-still water rippled, then parted like a curtain, revealing not the stone bottom one would expect, but a swirling vortex of stars and midnight blue, a portal opening where none should exist. The veil thins, gasped Elder Willow. The essence she carries responds to the dark moon. Cold wind rushed from the portal, carrying whispers in a language I somehow understood despite never having heard it before, calling to me, beckoning me home to a place I'd never been. And with it came figures, twisted shapes emerging from the swirling depths. Shadow walkers, dozens of them, answering the call of the power in my blood. They've breached the sacred grove. The stone elder's voice rose in alarm. Impossible, but it wasn't impossible. I understood with sudden clarity that the ancient wards protecting this place had been designed to keep out living creatures, not those that walked the boundaries between life and death, between worlds and voids. The shadow walkers existed in those in-between spaces, and the power in my blood had created a bridge for them to cross. Chaos erupted as council enforcers rushed to intercept the emerging creatures. Magic flashed, claws extended, battle cries rang through the once peaceful grove. Now, Damon growled, gripping my arms. While they're distracted, the bonding must happen immediately. Here, now. I glanced frantically at the battle unfolding around us. The dark moon is at its zenith. Your blood awakens fully. There won't be another chance. His eyes searched mine. Do you trust me? Despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the very real possibility that what we attempted might destroy us both, I found my answer without hesitation. With my life, I said. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a wonder, quickly replaced by urgent focus. Your hand, he said, producing a small blade from his belt that I extended my palm without question. He sliced a clean line across it, then did the same to his own hand. As our blood welled up, I felt the power in mine responding, pulsing, reaching for his. Repeat after me, he instructed, pressing our bleeding palms together. Blood to blood, I bind myself. Blood to blood, I bind myself. I echoed, feeling a curious warmth spreading from our joined hands. Life to life, I offer freely. Life to life, I offer freely. The warmth intensified, climbing up my arm. Soul to soul, I become yours as you become mine. Soul to soul, I become yours as you become mine. The words felt ancient in my mouth, as if generations of my bloodline had spoken them before. Under moon dark and stars bright, I claim you as mate, as equal, as heart. As I repeated his words, the energy building between us suddenly ignited, not in pain, but in a rush of connection so intense it stole my breath. I could feel him, not just his physical presence, but his essence. His courage, his loyalty, his capacity for love kept carefully guarded until now, and through our joined blood, I felt something else, his wolf nature, strong and grounded, reaching for the wild fame magic awakening in me, not to dominate or control, but to dance with it, to balance it like earth balances sky, around us. The battle raged, shadow walkers against council forces, ancient hatreds and fresh betrayals playing out in violent tableau. But within our joined hands, within the circle of power forming around us, something beautiful was happening. The stolen Fey essence surged fully awake in my veins, responding to the dark moon's call. But instead of overwhelming me, it found partnership with Damon's nature. Where before it had been chaotic, now it flowed in patterns, still powerful, still ancient, but no longer threatening to tear me apart from within. It's working, I gasped, watching as light spiraled up our joined arms, silver mingling with blue, wolf strength with Fey magic. Hold on, Damon urged as the energies intensified. Don't let go, no matter what happens. The vortex in the pool behind us pulsed, the doorway between realms responding to our bonding. The shadow walkers howled, not in triumph, but in desperation as they sensed their claim on me dissolving with each heartbeat of the forming mate bond. And then I understood. They hadn't come for me out of malice, but necessity. The essence my ancestor had stolen was never meant to exist in one bloodline, concentrated through generations. It was meant to flow between realms, maintaining balance. Its absence had been slowly destroying the in-between places the shadow walkers called home. They need it back, I said to Damon, revelation dawning even as our bond strengthened. Part of it, at least. Enough to heal their realm. He nodded, somehow understanding my meaning through our deepening connection. Can you control it now? Direct it. With his strength flowing through me, his nature balancing mine, I found I could. The chaotic power had become a tool, responding to my will rather than overwhelming it. Still holding his hand, I turned toward the portal and the creatures fighting to reach us. Drawing deep from the well of power that had awakened fully within me, I separated a stream of pure Fey essence, enough to restore balance without losing the core of what had become part of me. Take what you need, I called to them in their own language. Words I somehow knew without learning. But no more. The debt is paid. I released the stream of power toward the portal. It flowed like liquid starlight, a ribbon of pure magic that the shadow walkers ceased fighting to watch with hungry eyes. As it reached the vortex, they abandoned their attack on the council forces, rushing instead to follow the essence back to their realm, drinking in its power as they went. The last of them disappeared into the swirling depths, and the portal began to close. The natural balance restored enough that the thinned veil could heal itself as the dark moon passed. Silence fell over the sacred grove. The council members and their enforcers stared in disbelief at what they had witnessed, at Damon and me still standing with joined hands, wrapped in the fading glow of our newly formed bond. Elder Willow was the first to approach, her wooden features arranged in what might have been awe. The ancient text spoke true, she said softly. Wolf and Fey, balanced and bonded. You've done what our separate realms could not. Restored harmony without destruction. The thread is contained, asked the stone elder, suspicion lingering in her rocky voice. Not contained, I corrected, feeling new confidence flowing through me, partly mine, partly Damon's through our bond. Transformed, balanced. The essence remains part of me, but no longer dangerous or unstable. Because of the mate bond, Damon added, his thumb stroking the back of my hand where our blood had mingled and healed, leaving matching silver scars. What the council feared most has become the very solution they couldn't see. The ancient wolf stepped forward, his milky eye somehow seeing more clearly than many with perfect vision. The alpha of Blackridge has always been stubborn, he said, though I detected grudging respect in his tone. It seems, in this case, that stubbornness has served us all. A formal acknowledgement from the elders followed, not quite an apology, but recognition that the threat had passed, that I was no longer a vessel to be contained but a balanced being with both Fae and human nature. Anchored by my bond with Damon. As the council dispersed to assess the damage to their sacred grove, Damon and I remained by the now calm pool, our hands still joined, unwilling to break contact so soon after forming our connection. I can feel you, I marveled, exploring the new awareness in my mind, his presence like a warm hearth at the edge of consciousness. Your emotions, your thoughts, and I you, he said, raising our joined hands to press a kiss to my scarred palm. Your joy, your fear, your courage, all of it now part of me, as I am part of you. So I'm really your Luna now? I asked, still adjusting to the implications. The smile that transformed his features, open, unguarded, filled with love, took my breath away. If you choose to be, the bond makes us mates, but taking your place as Luna of Blackridge Pack is still your decision. I stepped closer, my free hand rising to trace the scar along his face, the mark of old pain and sacrifice that had shaped him into the man I loved. I choose you, I said simply. In this world, or any other, whatever comes next, we face it together. He lowered his forehead to rest against mine, our breaths mingling in the cool night air. Together, he agreed, the word of vow more binding than any ritual. Above us, stars wheeled in a moonless sky, not an ending, but a beginning. The dark moon that should have seen me imprisoned in eternal sleep had instead witnessed my awakening into a new life, a new power, a new love. And as Damon's lips finally met mine in a kiss that sealed our bond with tender fire, I understood that some fates aren't forced upon us, but chosen. Some promises aren't chains, but wings. Some loves are worth every risk. 3 months later, winter had transformed Blackridge Forest into a wonderland of crystalline beauty. Snow draped the ancient trees like lace veils, and morning sunlight caught in ice formations that sparkled with rainbow prisms. The cabin, our cabin now, stood as a haven of warmth against the pristine white landscape. Smoke curling lazily from the chimney into the clear blue sky that I stood at the edge of the stream, now frozen into fantastic shapes where my still developing powers had interacted with flowing water during practice sessions. 3 months since the dark moon. 3 months of learning to balance the Fae and human aspects of my nature. 3 months of building a life I never could have imagined. When I'd first crossed the boundary into these woods during that fateful storm, "You'll freeze out here," came the deep voice I'd grown to love more each day. I turned to find Damon approaching, his powerful form bundled against the cold in ways his wolf form never needed. Through our bond, I felt his concern tinged with admiration. He worried about my comfort even as he appreciated the sight of me surrounded by winter's glory. I don't feel the cold the way I used to, I reminded him with a smile. Apparently Fae blood has its advantages. He reached me in 3 long strides, strong arms wrapping around me from behind, chin resting atop my head. Advantages and responsibilities, he murmured, a note of pride in his voice. He was right about that. Since our bonding and the resolution with the Shadow Walkers, my position had evolved beyond simply being Damon's mate. The council, impressed by how we had resolved a threat they'd thought unmanageable, had appointed me liaison between the 5 territories, and the small but growing number of Fae-blooded who had begun emerging from hiding. It seemed my great-grandmother hadn't been the only one to escape to the human realm generations ago. As word spread of a Fae royal living openly under wolf protection, others with diluted bloodlines had started appearing, seeking guidance, community, understanding of the heritage that had been hidden from them as it had been from me. Kira sent word from the northern border, Damon said, his chest rumbling pleasantly against my back as he spoke. Another one arrived last night. Young woman, maybe 20, powers just beginning to manifest. I'll meet with her this afternoon, I said, leaning into his warmth. Help her understand what's happening to her. His arms tightened around me, protective yet respectful of my strength. So much had changed between us since those early days of suspicion and uncertainty. The mate bond had opened channels of understanding that words alone could never achieve. But it was the daily choice to love, to support each other's growth, to share burdens and joys equally, that had truly transformed our relationship. The pack has prepared the old Johnson cabin for her, he said. Close enough for training, far enough for privacy. I smiled at this evidence of how fully the Blackridge pack had embraced their alpha's unconventional mate and the changes I represented. Initial wariness had given way to cautious acceptance, then to genuine welcome as they witnessed how our bond had strengthened not just Damon and me, but the territory itself. The balance we'd struck between Fae magic and wolf strength had extended outward, creating subtle but profound shifts in the forest's energy. Game was more plentiful. Plants grew more vigorously. The very air seemed clearer, as if ancient disharmonies were finally healing. What are you thinking about? Damon asked, sensing the contemplative flow of my emotions through our bond. I turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to trace the scar along his jaw, a gesture that had become habitual, intimate. How different my life is from what I imagined. 3 months ago, I was serving coffee at the Pinehaven diner, worried about making rent. Regrets? He asked, though our bond told him the answer before I spoke it. Not one, I assured him, rising on tiptoes to brush my lips against his. Though I do miss indoor plumbing occasionally. He laughed, the sound still rare enough to delight me. The spring renovation will fix that. Modern conveniences without losing the cabin's character. The best of both worlds, I mused. Seems to be our specialty. His amber eyes warmed with tenderness as he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. Through our bond, I felt the depth of his love, still wondrous to him. This capacity for emotion he'd kept carefully guarded for so long. Walk with me, he asked, offering his hand. I took it, our matching silver scars aligning as our fingers intertwined. We strolled through the winter forest, following paths that had become familiar over months of shared exploration. The wolves patrolling the perimeter nodded respectfully as we passed, acknowledgement of both their alpha and their Luna. The council meets tomorrow, Damon said as we climbed a ridge that offered views across the valley. They'll want our quarterly report on the integration program. The integration program was the formal name for our work with emerging Fey-blooded individuals, teaching them to understand and control their abilities while finding their place within the complex hierarchy of supernatural territories. It had been Elder Willow's idea, but Damon and I had shaped it into something that honored both heritages rather than fearing their differences. I've prepared most of it, I replied, though I'm still not sure how to explain Eliza's water manipulation abilities. They're unlike anything in the old texts. We'll figure it out together, he assured me, the confidence in his voice warming me more effectively than any code. We always do. We reached the summit of the ridge, a flat expanse of stone that jutted out over the forest below, offering panoramic views of Blackridge territory. To the east, just visible through the bare winter trees, lay the faint outlines of Pine Haven, the human town that now seemed to exist in another lifetime that I still visited occasionally. Had coffee with Martha from the diner. Collected my few remaining belongings from the apartment I no longer needed. But those visits felt increasingly like courtesy calls to a past self. Necessary, but no longer defining. Damon released my hand, moving to the edge of the ridge with the natural confidence of someone who had navigated these heights since childhood. The winter sun caught in his black hair, highlighting those midnight blue undertones I'd first noticed months ago. I brought you here for a reason, he said, turning back to face me. Something in his tone, a mixture of solemnity and barely contained joy, sent a flutter of anticipation through me. What reason? I asked, moving to join him at the precipice. He took both my hands in his expression more open than I'd ever seen it, even after months of our souls being connected through the mate bond. In wolf tradition, he began, formal recognition of a Luna happens in stages. First comes the mate bond itself, then comes the pack's acceptance. He paused, I searching mine. The final stage is the Luna's full integration with the territory, not just with the pack, but with the land itself. I felt a tremor of emotion through our bond, his anticipation, his love, his pride in what we had built together. The winter solstice approaches, he continued. The longest night, when ancient powers reach their peak. The perfect time for the final ritual, if you choose it. What does this ritual involve? I asked, already certain of my answer but wanting to understand the tradition fully. A night under stars, he explained. Our bond opened completely to each other and to the land. The sharing of visions, past, present, future, and at dawn. His voice softened. The exchange of promises that extend beyond this lifetime. Marriage, in human terms, but deeper, more primal, more eternal. Our souls are already bound, I pointed out, squeezing his hands gently. What would change? Nothing and everything. The corner of his mouth lifted in that almost smile I'd first fallen in love with. The pack would bear witness. The territory would acknowledge you not just as my chosen mate, but as Luna in your own right, with all the authority and responsibility that entails. I considered his words, feeling the weight and honor of what he offered. 3 months ago, I'd been thrust into a world I never knew existed, learning truths about myself that had been hidden for generations. Now I stood on the threshold of fully embracing that world, that heritage, that future, not out of necessity or fear, but out of love and choice. Yes, I said simply. Through our bond, I let him feel the depth of certainty behind that single word. Joy radiated from him, so powerful it nearly took physical form. He pulled me close, his kiss fierce and tender at once. A promise of passions to come when we were less exposed to winter air and potentially watchful pack eyes. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, I rested my head against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. I never imagined this would be my life, I murmured. Disappointed? He asked, his tone light, but a flicker of genuine question beneath it. I leaned back to meet his gaze, letting him see the absolute certainty in mine. How could I be? I found my truth, my power, my home. I reached up to trace the scar that had first intrigued me, the mark of old pain that had shaped him into the man he'd become. I found you. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability he showed to no one else. When I found you in that storm, he said quietly, bleeding and lost and so stubbornly brave, I thought I was protecting you from the forest's dangers. His hand came up to cup my face. I didn't realize you were saving me from a far worse fate. What fate? I asked, leaning into his touch. A life half lived, he answered simply. All duty, no joy. All strength, no tenderness. His thumb brushed my cheek in that gesture that had become his signature caress. You make me whole, Lena. Not just as alpha to Luna, but as man to woman, as soul to soul. Wind swept across the ridge, carrying the clean scent of pine and snow, stirring tendrils of my hair. Below us stretched the forest that had brought us together. Ancient trees and hidden streams, secret glades and shadow-dappled paths. Our territory, our home. There will be challenges ahead, he continued. Ever the pragmatic alpha. The council, the new Fey-blooded arrivals. The lingering questions about your ancestors' escape. His expression grew serious. Our world is changing because of what we are together. Not everyone welcomes change. Let them come, I said with quiet confidence. Feeling my dual nature, human determination and Fey magic, balanced by wolf strength through our bond, rise to meet whatever future awaited. We'll face it together. The smile that transformed his features then, open, unguarded, filled with love, still took my breath away even after months of seeing it. Together, he agreed, the word carrying the weight of a vow renewed, a s if in answer. A howl rose from the forest below, a member of our pack calling to others, the sound pure and wild in the winter air. Damon's head tilted, listening with his enhanced senses. They're celebrating, he translated, amusement coloring his voice. Word travels fast in a wolf pack. Should we join them? I asked, already feeling the pull of community, of belonging, of shared purpose. He nodded. But before we turned to descend, he pulled me close once more, his lips brushing my ear as he whispered words that sent warmth coursing through me despite the winter chill. Mine, he growled softly, the possessive claim balanced by the absolute respect and equality our bond embodied. That I smiled against his chest, remembering rain and fear and a first meeting that had changed everything, remembering the journey from stranger to protector to lover to mate. Yours, I agreed, lifting my face to his, as you are mine, in this life and all that follow. Above us, winter sunlight caught in ice crystals on evergreen boughs, scattering rainbow light across snow-covered ground. Below us, our pack moved through ancient trees that had witnessed countless seasons, countless lives, countless loves, and here on this ridge, between sky and earth, we sealed our promise with a kiss that tasted of belonging, of home, of forever. 5 years later, the summer solstice celebration was in full swing, transforming Blackridge Forest into a festival of light and sound. Paper lanterns hung from ancient branches, casting golden illumination across the large clearing that had become our community's gathering place. Pack members mingled with visiting delegations from neighboring territories and the growing settlement of Fey-blooded that had established itself along our eastern border. From my vantage point on a small rise, I watched it all with quiet satisfaction. This world we had helped build, this harmony that had once seemed impossible. Mama, look what I can do. I turned to see our daughter, Alara, her dark hair gleaming with the same midnight blue highlights as her father's, eyes alight with excitement as she held out her small hands. Above her palms hovered a perfect sphere of water, pulled from the nearby stream and held in place not by childish concentration, but by instinctive control that at 4 years old. She navigated her dual heritage with the careless ease of one who had never known a world where wolf and fey were separate. Born of our bond, alpha wolf strength and royal fey magic intertwined, she represented the future we had fought for. That's beautiful, little moon, I praised, kneeling to her level. Remember what we practiced about returning it when you're done? She nodded solemnly, then guided the water sphere back toward the stream in a graceful arc, releasing it with barely a splash. Pride surged through me, not just in her growing abilities, but in the natural balance she embodied. Unlike my own chaotic awakening, her powers emerged gradually, guided by parents who understood both sides of her nature. Where's Papa? She asked, already scanning the gathering for Damon's distinctive form. Meeting the new council representatives, I explained, pointing toward the large oak table where Damon stood in conversation with delegates wearing the emblems of all 5 territories: Wolf, Sylvan, Stoneskin, Waterkin, and Shadow. Much had changed in 5 years. After the success of our integration program, the council had undergone its first structural reform in centuries. No longer merely a governing body overseeing separate territories, it now included representatives from the Fey-blooded community and focused on harmonious coexistence rather than rigid separation. Not that the transition had been easy. The early years had brought challenges, resistance from traditionalists, incursions from those who feared change, complicated questions of heritage and belonging. But each crisis had ultimately strengthened the foundation we were building, proving that balance between different natures was not just possible, but powerful. Luna, called a familiar voice. I turned to find Kira approaching, her copper hair now streaked with dignified silver, her amber eyes warm with affection that had grown slowly but steadily over the years. The tension that had once existed between us, Alpha's sister, wary of his unusual mate, had transformed into deep respect and eventually friendship. The Thornhallow delegation has arrived, she informed me, nodding toward the forest edge where newcomers emerged into the lantern light, that I felt the familiar flutter of anticipation at their appearance. Thornhallow, the mysterious forest from my dark moon dreams, the ancestral home of my Fey bloodline, had re-established contact with our world 3 years ago. The gradual reopening of pathways between realms had been another unexpected consequence of our bond, another balance restored. Will you watch Alara? I asked Kira, who nodded and immediately took my daughter's hand. Come, little one, she said with the indulgent tone she reserved exclusively for her niece. Let's find those honey cakes you like before the young wolves devour them all. As they headed toward the food tables, I made my way across the clearing, greeting pack members and visitors alike. Familiar faces nodded respectfully, not just to the Alpha's mate, but to the Luna of Blackridge in my own right. The authority I carried now had been earned through years of work, of listening and learning, of bridging divides between different peoples. That I reached the Thornhallow delegation as they completed formal greetings with the council representatives. Their leader, a tall woman with eyes like twilight and hair the color of autumn leaves, turned to me with a smile that carried ancient knowledge. Cousin, she greeted me, the term acknowledging our distant bloodline connection. Your territory flourishes. The balance you've achieved sings in every tree, every stone. Welcome to Blackridge, I replied, accepting the small wooden box she offered, a ceremonial gift containing seeds from Thornhallow's legendary gardens. May your stay bring mutual understanding and renewed bonds. The formal exchange complete, her expression softened. Your daughter grows strong in her gifts. We sense her even across the veil. She'll visit when she's ready, I said, the gentle firmness in my voice making clear that while we welcomed connections with my ancestral homeland, our child would choose her own path when the time came. The Thornhallow representative nodded, accepting the boundary with grace. As it should be. Choice freely made has always been the truest magic. A warm presence at my back announced Damon's arrival before his scent reached me. Even after years together, the mate bond between us remained vibrant, a constant awareness, a sharing of strength and emotion that had only deepened with time. The opening ceremony begins soon, he murmured, his hand finding its natural place at the small of my back. Through our bond, I felt his pride in what we had built together, his love for me and our daughter, his satisfaction in seeing our vision of coexistence taking tangible form as we moved toward the center of the clearing, where a circular arrangement of stones marked the ceremonial space. I caught sight of Alara perched on the shoulders of one of the younger pack members, giggling as she was carried through the crowd. She has your stubbornness, Damon observed, following my gaze with a smile, and your tendency to command a room without even trying, I countered, leaning into his solid presence. His arm slipped around my waist, drawing me closer as we reached the edge of the stone circle. Any regrets? He asked quietly, not with insecurity, but with the honest communication that had become the foundation of our relationship. That I looked around at the gathering, at wolves and fey and humans with hidden heritage, at stone skins conversing with waterkin, at sylvan elders sharing stories with wide-eyed children, at the community that had formed from what was once division and fear. Not one, I assured him, turning to face the man who had gone from stranger to protector to mate to partner in every sense. My fingers traced the familiar path along his scar, the gesture that had become our private ritual of connection over the years. Though I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gotten lost in your forest during that storm. You would have found your way to me eventually, he said with absolute certainty. Some fates are written in blood and starlight. Poetic for an alpha wolf, I teased. Though the sentiment warmed me to my core, his smile, still rare in public, but freely given in moments like this, transformed his rugged features. You bring out unexpected qualities in me, Luna. Before I could respond, Alara came bounding toward us, breaking away from her caretaker with the wildness of a child comfortable in her own power. It's starting, she announced, inserting herself between us with the easy confidence of a child deeply loved. Damon lifted her into his arms, and together we turned toward the center of the stone circle where Elder Willow, older, now but still vital, raised her gnarled hands to begin the solstice ceremony. As darkness settled fully around our lantern-lit clearing, I felt the perfect rightness of this moment. My family beside me, our community around us, the forest that had brought us together embracing it all. 5 years ago, I had stumbled lost and afraid through rain-lashed trees, fleeing what I thought was a monster. Instead, I had found my destiny, my power, my home. I had found him, the werewolf who claimed me, protected me, loved me, who had taken my innocence about the world and my own nature, and in return made me his Luna. If sensing my thoughts through our bond, Damon's free arm tightened around me, his lips brushing my temple in a gesture of tenderness few outside our family ever witnessed. Forever mine, he whispered, the familiar words carrying 5 years of shared history, shared struggles, shared joy. I leaned into his strength, watching firelight reflect in our daughter's eager eyes as she witnessed the magic of our world, a world she would help shape long after we were gone. Forever yours, I agreed. In this life and all that follow. Above us, summer stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, bearing witness to promises kept, to balance maintained, to love that had transformed not just 2 lives, but an entire world, the legacy of a storm, a forest, and a love that defied all boundaries.